So factorizing algebraic expressions, if you thought expanding was important, factorizing is significantly more important. It's a very underrated skill. And all we're going to be doing here is we're just going to recap some of those factorization techniques that should always be at the back of your mind as you're approaching almost every algebraic type of question. All right, so we'll quickly go through those rules in the concept box that you guys see in front of you guys. So number one, common factor. If you notice there's a common factor, in this case, k. So let me just get my highlighter out. Right, so you can see there's k in both of those terms there. Pull the k out, so it'll be k outside of a plus b in brackets. Right, so that's normal. We've done this since year 8. It should be second nature to you guys. I'm more interested in 2, 3, and I guess there should be a fourth one underneath there, which I'll pull and shot there. All right, so number 2, the difference of 2 squares. We saw this with expansion, but it's just back to front, right? So if you have a situation where you have something squared minus something squared, that just factorizes into a plus b, a minus b that we saw in the previous video with expansion. So it's basically the opposite. So if you haven't sort of remembered or you've forgotten about this, factorization is the opposite of expanding. We want those brackets. Now, question 3 could be a little bit controversial because different students and different teachers or different tutors would use a different method to sort of factorize quadratic trinomials. So it's a situation where you want to go ahead and you want to factorize something that looks like that. Okay. I personally like to use the what we call the cross method, largely because that's how I was taught in high school. But sort of as I've sort of done more and more of these sort of things, I do find the cross method is a little bit more efficient. Because once you get the hang of it, it's kind of like you can see the answer, you just write down the answer and you don't need to do any working out. That's honestly for me the big benefit. When we move on to the examples, I'll explain a little bit more of how you will go ahead and use the cross method, but I'm also very much so aware that PSF is another common method that a lot of teachers use to factorize quadratics. If you're super used to PSF, by all means, you can use it. It's perfectly fine. But if you want to be a little bit more efficient, especially if you're an Extension 1 student where sometimes speed is important, you might want to just listen to how we would use the cross method and how that could be beneficial for you. More on that later though. The last technique here is grouping in pairs. So that's typically when you have 4 terms. You can see that's 4 terms in expression. And it's almost in this course here. At the moment you see a question that goes factorize this and there's 4 terms, just think about grouping in pairs. So it basically means you group the first 2 terms together, the last 2 terms together, and then you can refactorize that again. But we'll look at an example and we'll see how that sort of works nicely. Example 5. Let's jump straight to this, right? So for part A, we're just going to factorize it normally. So for part A, we've got a negative 3x squared y minus 6xy squared. So I can see there's a number of things that's common to both of these terms. I can see I can pull a negative 3 out. I can take 1x out and I can take 1y out. So there's going to be some sort of term left over on the inside. Now, if I take a negative 3xy, I'm going to have an x remaining in that first term. If I take a negative 3 out of the negative 6, I'm firstly going to have a plus 2. So you're just going to make sure that it's a plus 2 there. And if I take the x and the y out, I'm going to have a y remaining because there's a y squared in the original term there. Okay, so this here would be my factorization. You've done this multiple times, but I guess in the test, what you do want to do is to quickly check your answer, because if you were to re-expand that out, notice that you do get the original question. So that's how you know you've sort of you fully factorized it correctly. All right. Part B, we have an x plus 3 y all squared plus a 5x plus 3y. So in this particular question over here, the temptation is when you recognize this perfect square is to go ahead and expand it, but that's not the purpose of the question, is it? The purpose of the question here is to factorize. So don't tunnel vision into just seeing these patterns and then going ahead and doing something that you're not supposed to do. We want to factorize. So when you have a long chain of expressions like that, it's kind of handy to see where the brackets are and to see where the plus or minus sign is. So in this particular case, we have a plus sign here in the middle. So visually, how I want you guys to interpret it is that we have essentially 2 terms. Now I know there's more plus signs inside the brackets, but because it's inside a bracket, think of that bracket as one whole sort of item. Okay, so we only have two terms over here, that first one there and that second one over there. Now, out of those two terms that I've underlined in orange, there is something that's common. They both have an x plus 3y factor that I could factorize out. So if I factorize an x plus 3y out, right, I'm going to have something remaining. If I take an x plus 3y out from the first bracket, I'm still going to have an x plus 3y term remaining out of that first term because I had two of those terms initially. So one of them will still remain inside that bracket there. Now, if I take an x plus 3y out of this one, what remains? The plus as well as the 5. So it'll be plus 5. All right. So that there is the factorization for those types of questions. Like I said, it's best to see where the brackets and where the plus signs are so you can see how many terms, and then you look for those two terms and what's common to both of them. So this first example over here, if my screen works with me, is looking at how to do your very, very basic sort of factorization. I might pause this video here. The next one, we'll look at the next example, looking at a different type of factorization technique. Hey everybody, if this video helped you, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It supports the channel and helps me keep making more free content for you. I'll see you guys next time.